Thanks, everybody, for helping me out with that. Really, first of all, thanks for having me today. It's an honor to be here for a few reasons, really. To be in a community that my mom and dad, are such integral parts of this has a pretty deep personal meaning to me. So for a lot of you, when we first moved here, now I know my parents were here. Kurt was born, my older brother, okay, was born in West Michigan. We moved away, but when we moved back, I was 10. And so I see the Van Abemas, I see the Baldus family. I see so many faces, Bob, when I was 10. And to be in front of you now is really quite an honor. So thanks for having me. I think it's important to ask the question, why is this guy talking to us? What gives him the right? And I think that's actually a fair question. I'm not a social worker. I've met a few social workers today, and I think you have a lot to say about empathy, actually. I've met other people already this morning, and I just think it's reasonable to say, why are you here? I'm a curious teacher. And I work with teenagers, and I want them to be the best versions of themselves they can be. And to do that, they need to listen to each other and accept each other and embrace each other. And that's really hard to do. It's hard to do at any age, but it's really hard to do in junior high, in high school. And so I think the reason I'm here is because I'm just so curious and passionate about getting teenagers to be their best selves. And to do that, we need to do more work. And I'm ready to take on that work. So I want to start really with Brene Brown. We've already heard from her. I'm an English teacher. You're going to get a lot of book recommendations from me, everybody. So Daring Greatly is one of the great ones. How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. It's an exceptional read. She says, so to have common ground about empathy, what is it? There's this great video that she has. I just chose not to share it today. It's kind of longer. But I think courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. Maybe that can be our common language or understanding of vulnerability, is to let ourselves be seen. And I think it's just good to start that. She writes in the book, owning our story. I value stories. Again, the English teacher in me. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. I want to read that one more time. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And I think before we get too far into this, I need to speak a bit about where I learned empathy and vulnerability. From whom, from where did I get these lessons? You get them from all over the place when you start really, inspecting it. And one is from people. So I actually love this picture because I'm cute, and my older brothers, only not so, like it's so. But I learned it from, and I'm glad they're here today. I learned it from my parents, who learned it from their parents, and we learn it from each other, right? So we be in the presence of others who are empathetic, who listen, who share, who take their younger sons, to soup kitchens, who take their youngest sons to go to Chicago, who to work on Habitat for Humanity, who just have their sons be with them, So you learn empathy there. You learn it from people, but it's not the, I mean, the good news, there's great news in this, that it's not the only place to learn it, right? Because we know that not every student, not every person, not all of us have those kind of leaders. You know, I mean, maybe parents aren't ready to teach or model empathy. I was lucky. I had parents who were ready to do that. But we can learn it from other places like books. One of my favorites, To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, it's amazing how this book has taught me empathy through the years. When I first read it, I was the boy version of Scout. I mean, quite literally, if you remember at the end of that book, after Boo has, you know, taken care of business, right? He's there scared, and he finally speaks to Scout, Jean Louise, Miss Jean Louise, will you take me home? And at the, I mean, it is the literal last page. She takes him home, which was so scary to the kids at the beginning of the book, but now feels more comfortable. And she takes him home, he goes inside, and she spans the entire experience from his perspective. She's literally standing in his space, seeing things from his point of view by the end of that book. Books can teach us about empathy. Now, as a dad, I want to be this Atticus Finch. You know, I want to be that guy. Books can teach us. But experiences can too. In young adulthood, I was in theater in high school, theater in college, and I played a depressed man in a play called Off the Map. I played a lovelorn working class man in a play called Fen. I even played a kitchen wench in Shakespeare once. Yes, the dress and all. When you're in theater, you're literally standing in other people's shoes. You have to understand their motivations. Why would they do something like this? So you need to find it within yourself and then express it outward. Arts, creativity, theater. So we learn empathy from all these places. A huge benefit in my own self-reflection. Now, as I'm setting all this up, I really am sort of presenting myself, I think, as an angel, some sort of like perfect, as some sort of like, look at me with all this empathy I have that I have to give to you, right? But I think we ought to be pretty clear about it. The truth is, I've played all three parts of the equation. And it's still actually hard for me to admit the first one. I've been the bully. I've been the bullied. Most often, I've been the bystander. Okay, but I was the bully a little bit with this girl in school. We mocked her lack of, to us, beauty. And when she would pass, we did a little sing-songy, hey, beautiful, like that, you know. And yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's terrible. We were fulfilling what Emily Bazelon says about bullying. It was verbal abuse, verbal or physical, by the way, repeated over time with an imbalance of power. She was shy, she was quiet, she didn't feel confident, and we took advantage of it, you know. Why? I don't know. I mean, to fit in, to not be mocked myself. I was a big kid. I have been big all my life. So maybe let me push it on to somebody else. So there's not a great moral to this story. I'm even a little hesitant to say what I'm about to say, but I'll let you know that I've reached out to her. It's nothing magical. This isn't like a perfect movie where we're friends, but I've said sorry. And that's good. I've been the bullied, especially about my weight. It hurts, right? You start to lose your sense of self and your place, and that can be really challenging. And it turns out you need good parents and good friends to help you through. But the bystander is the role that I think is really interesting. So Emily Bazelon, this, I told you to give book recommendations. Emily Bazelon, Sticks and Stones. It's a terrific book, one that can be ordered from the Bookman. And she says this about, she writes this in the book. She says 90% of bullying happens in front of witnesses. 90% of bullying happens in front of witnesses. And she writes, quote, students were allergic to snitching. They could see that when kids did report bullying, the situation often worsened for them. Right? So what kind of system do we have to put in place where we can elevate, where we can lift up the bystander? And you know what's really interesting? We have to give the bystander more power. And one way to do that is to say, hey, bystander, guess what? Emily Bazelon lines this in the book. She says, you don't have to address the bully. You don't have to stop the bully. You have to check on the victim, right? Check on the victim. Say, I saw that, I'm thinking of you, are you okay? Right? If we just make that simple shift of, I'm nervous, this person's bigger than I am, or stronger, or has more social power, or has more, don't even address them right now, right? We can deal with that as a community later. But go to that victim and say, I'm thinking of you. We were talking earlier that there's no really like perfection to empathy. There's no perfection. We were talking about this in our small circle earlier this morning. All we can do is be there and say, I'm listening and I hear you and I'm here, and I'm here. And so we've done some specific things in Spring Lake to try to help the bystander effect, or to try to work on some of this. We have a new group called, new within the last 3 years or 4 years, called Be Nice. We have Rachel's Challenge at the middle school, which is a system and organization to help with this kind of information. And when we have these little like blank cards, they're called Laker Love Notes. And so they're just blank cards, and you can take one off the wall and write on it and deliver it to the office, and they'll get it to the right person. So we've got some things rolling. But my argument is always what we need to work on is culture. Because these things come and go, right? You have these cards, but finally the cards run out. Somebody's got to put them on the wall, and eventually that gets tiring. It's hard to do. So what we need to do is just make sure we're working on kindness. But cruelty, right? It exists. I mean, in Spring Lake, we've got it good. We're a good school. We're doing well. But all the time, I see this kind of writing in a journal. The name calling. This is a student who is now at university, high achieving student, smart. The student was in band, maybe not like classic popular, but at least from where I stood as a teacher, was popular in all the right ways. I mean, she had friends, was her own person. I didn't suspect any issue, and yet I saw this in a journal, and it made me move, You need something to make you move and make you act. And this was the thing for me. She said, the name calling and judging. They were calling me names because all my friends were boys. They whispered them in my ear in the hallway in class. Girls are mean. Words hurt more than sticks and stones, and those words, those names, still haunt me. I buried myself in baggier clothes so they did not have an excuse. It didn't matter. I still am those names to them. I still feel violated by them, and it's been 2 years since they stopped. The words still hurt. And it's back to that reaching full potential. I desperately want all people, but I work with teenagers, so I want teenagers to reach full potential. There's no way she couldn't. This was a block for her. I mean, if she didn't have the parents she did, who encouraged her through anyway, I'm nervous or scared what could be the result of that. So that moved me to some action, and here's where let's get real about this. What can we do? right? So a few years ago, that journal led me to the documentary film Bully. If you haven't seen it, please do. It's hard to watch, but I couldn't take my eyes off it either. And once I did that, I wanted to read more. I was really like, I can't let this student feel that way. And that student is representative of so many more who aren't willing to share it with me, right? So on to reading, Sticks and Stones. From there, we started a community book club. We even had almost 250 people sign up for a community book club. I think part of the issue with bullying and cruelty is that we only really talk about it when it's a confrontation, when somebody has just bullied, and so now I'm a victim and you're the bully and the school has to deal with it. And that's not a good space for real change, you know? And so for change, I wanted to try to get all the stakeholders, teachers, students, administrators, community members, business owners. Let's come together and have a discussion where we're safe, where we can really talk, where we can really listen. And so we did this, and mostly it was online. Actually, Emily Bazelon does talk a lot about technological bullying. I'm careful of blaming technology. It has problems, but I'm a little cautious of it because it can actually help us too. We just have to model how to use it. So we would do online discussions, and then finally we would get together in small groups. Different people would get together so that every voice was heard. Finally, we got together in our last meeting as a whole group, and we said, well, what can we do? How can this not stop? We did have like a big flyer or a big like poster that we had in town, but winter's tough, tore up the poster, that's gone. Any ideas you have, here's a physical representation. A lot of them go away. And I was thinking, what doesn't go away? Books, stories. So a student and I worked together, her name's Carlin Ortega. We worked together to write, edit, really, Elevate Empathy, written by 30 stories, 20 to 30 stories written by community members, because what we need to do is to share our stories, is to be vulnerable, is to open up. And so we collected stories from people in the community to do just that. We opened up, we told stories, but it turns out that books are hard to write and they're hard to publish. And so it was like, well, what are we, the book finally got done and it was like, wow, turning out a book every year sure seems like a challenge. What can we do? A podcast. Have people, let's record stories. This was an idea that came to me last year. We now have 80 episodes. In this one particular episode, and we won't listen to it, I'm conscious of time, but Finn talks about the transition from being female to male. A high school student willing to talk about that. Available to you, available to the world. It is pure power. So the Share Chair podcast, student and I sit somebody from the community, the school community, but anybody really in the community who has a story to tell us, and we learn from each other. We learn from listening with the podcast. So we started elevateempathy.com, where we are accepting writings and accepting art and doing good work on elevateempathy.com, and we try to share everybody's story. What story do you have to tell the world? Can you open up to us? Because if you open up to us, we can learn, and we're more free then to open up. Is it making a difference, right? I'm so nervous about this. I'm still nervous about this. Is it making a difference? Muskegon High School has started sharing stories. The very latest episode is about a teen mom. It is an incredible episode. this very quickly, the podcast is on iTunes or on Elevate Empathy. You can find it there too, or SoundCloud. So there, you can ask me about it later if you're interested. But Muskegon High School has joined in, publishing through us, but doing their own interviews. Hamilton High School has started to do the same. Sparta Junior High has just done the same. And this is only in our second year where these high schools and these junior highs are starting to see, man, you're valuing our students' voices? Let's go. We're in. We're all in. So, the tough question, how about you? What can you do? Action's hard, really hard. There are really only two options. You can help, you can do something or do nothing. MLK Jr. during the Civil Rights Movement, I was actually just in Atlanta for NCTE, the conference, and I went to the Civil Rights Museum. What a place, a powerful place. And I was reminded of the power of MLK. And he wrote during the Civil Rights Movement, history will have to record that the greatest tragedy of this period of social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. So how do we take action? I mean, what can we do to help? And I think it's actually way more simple. There's no perfection to empathy. There's no perfection to feeling with or experiencing or vulnerability. There's no ceiling to it. So don't wait for the moment to be perfect at it before you go help. Just go help. Okay? So really I want to leave you today with some ideas. Take somebody out for coffee, you know. I said earlier, my parents helped me so much, books helped me so much, experiencing theater helped me so much. Go experience some theater, go do some art, invite somebody to do it with you, and go for a walk, have an experience. Go share a book with somebody, start a book club. Really, it's enough. That's enough. If you're like, but that doesn't seem like helping, it is. It's connection. It's feeling with, sharing. Go out for coffee to listen, not to speak, but to listen. Find somebody who matters to you. Find a hurt relationship and say, can we talk? Be passionate and not fix empathy. We will not, we won't. There are some critics out there who will say, well, your work's bullying's not healed or taken care of. That's true. It will never be. I argue it will never be. Or we're going to wait for some sort of fix to make it perfect? No. Just help now. And the best way to do that is that we don't have to make empathy perfect. All we have to do is elevate it. Thank you.